are equal, and that's pH of 7.
That's distilled water.
7 is distilled water, correct, right. Okay, so 0 to 6.9 is an electron stealer, an unmet gain, 7.0 pH, and the electron donors are 7.1 to 14, okay? Is it? I'll try not to say that. Cellular voltage, because you know, when we think of voltage, we think of the voltage in our house, right? 110 volts coming in, and it's positive. What does that mean? Well, what it really means is the same thing. Coming in the house are copper wires, and what's running on those copper wires are electrons. Okay, so it's the same thing. They're just referring to it as a positive. Okay, so don't get confused by that. But when we're in the body, and it's in solution, or in an ionic environment, when you see the negative sign, like sodium positive and chloride negative, what negative means is it has 1 extra electron. If it had 2 extra electrons, it would be 2 negative. And if it had 3, it would be 3 negative. Okay, so those are electrons. So that's why when we're talking about current in the body, it's in an electrical, it's in a negative form. So I didn't want you to get confused with the voltage coming in your house and the voltage in the cell. So an electron deficient, electropositive is an acid pH. So health is having enough voltage or electrons for cells to function. Optimal functioning, what is the optimal functioning of a human being? Well, we know what it is for bears and goldfish, but we have no clue for human beings. We know that Einstein used about 7 to 8% of his brain. We know that before the flood, people were living about 912 years. We know that there are guys in countries like Machu Picchu that are fathering children at the age of 110. So what is the optimal functioning of a human? We have no clue. We're not anywhere near it. We shouldn't even be thinking about that. We haven't even gotten to normal functioning. Okay. I think adulthood should begin at about 100 to 110. You just play around the first 100 years. So feeling bad is a loss of voltage, you know, minus to minus 15 millivolts. Sick is minus 10. Can't get out of bed, minus 10. And once you get on the other side of the minuses into the electron stealers, is when you get then you get really sick. Okay. Dr. Keith Brewer, PhD, in Pharmacology, Biochemistry, and Behavior, Volume 21 in 1984. The name of the article, The High pH Therapy for Cancer, Tests on Mice and Humans. Came up with some conclusions from his studies. Pretty interesting. Step 1 is what he found in the laboratory with animals. Abnormal membranes mean that the glucose enters the cells, but the oxygen can't. We're going to talk about membranes in a minute. So if the oxygen can't get in, you get step 2. What happens now, you can't use oxygen when you burn the glucose. And if you can't use oxygen when you burn glucose, it's a process known as substrate phosphorylation or fermentation. And fermentation results in lactic acid production. Okay. The other thing that is not in his conclusions is when a cell does that, it's going to need a lot more glucose to survive. Because a healthy cell is going to produce a lot more energy from one molecule of glucose because it can burn it with oxygen. So, okay. So step 3, the acidic medium, the DNA loses its positive and negative radical sequences, and the same happens for RNA, so you start to get damage, DNA damage. Step 4, you have acid. See, all enzymes in the body have an optimal pH and an optimal temperature. So the reason that you can't heat any foods above, plant or animal enzymes above 105 as they start to lose their tertiary structure and they no longer function normally. Okay? So that's why you can't heat up food. You can heat up food, but if you heat up food, you're going to lose the enzymes. Okay? So the reason our body functions best, and we have an optimal temperature, our body functions best at 98.6 because that's the temperature at which all of our enzymes function. Except for our white blood cells. They function best at 103.5, which is why we get fevers. Okay, so fevers are not Tylenol deficiencies. Fevers are the body turning up the functioning of the immune system. Okay? So cold-blooded animals, like a lizard and a snake, need to get into a hot place when they're healing. So if they get a cut on their tail, they'll crawl onto a hot rock and bake. Okay? But remember, we live in boxes and drive around in machines, so we don't know that, so we start taking drugs when we get fevers. Brilliant.
Back to step 3, and you said something about the glucose. Is that one of the reasons we might tend to overeat for this craving for glucose? For
Yeah.
energy?
Yeah, if one molecule of glucose, a cancer cell takes one molecule of glucose and produces 2 ATPs, which are the energy packages. The healthy cell takes one molecule of glucose and makes 38 ATPs. So in order for the cancer to survive in that environment, it needs to get 19 times more glucose. And so it does. So it's eating glucose all the time. And the only way it can get glucose into its cell when it's standing or sitting or floating next to a healthy cell is by having more insulin receptors. Because it has all these insulin receptors, it grabs the insulin, opens its doors more quickly, and gets fed.
I've noticed when I examine people's blood in the microscope, they've eaten cooked foods, produces leukocytosis. So I was wondering, why is that? It's almost like your sees that the cooked food is almost like a poison.
Yeah.
The white blood cells get stimulated to attack the cooked food.
Sure. She was saying that when she examines blood under a microscope and sees that after people eat a cooked meal, they have a leukocytosis, which means they have an elevation of their white blood cells. And that's because cooked food is poison. It's not food, you know. It's no longer food. It now requires, it's now considered as a foreign substance. And so when our body detects a foreign substance, it has to bring into play the immune system. So that's what happens.